Testing, testing.
Good morning and welcome to the Public Service Commission's administrative meeting for January 11th, 2023. Happy New Year to all. We have a relatively short agenda this morning, but before we get started, I'd like to particularly mention a very important report that came out right before Christmas, the Public Conference 57 report with respect to modernizing the Commission's regulatory practices. And it is a must-read, I would argue, for any petitioner or party that comes before this commission. Particularly, I'd like to reflect on all the people that put such hard work into this report. I noted that 2022 was the year of innovation of the commission, and we attempted in many respects to modernize our regulatory practices, modernize our procedures here at the commission. We went to full electronic filing, partly forced by COVID, but we're going to keep those provisions in effect permanently. I'd like to thank all the stakeholders who participated in the PC57 effort, including our technical staff. Of course, the work group leaders, both Andrew Johnston, our executive secretary, and Amanda Best, our brand new deputy executive secretary. This report makes a case how these commissions, not only this PSC, but all PSCs, need to be positioned for success in the 21st century. And we do that by innovating, by modernizing, by taking account and inventory of our resources, both human resources and otherwise. There's a lot of very good recommendations that the Commission is currently considering in this report, and we will look forward to acting on it in the new year. But we need the partnership, as the report notes, of all stakeholders, of the People's Council, of our utilities, of advocates, of special interests. We'll work with anybody to make sure that this commission honors its vision of being a regulatory leader in this country, and I think we are. So, again, the PC57 report was issued on December 22nd of last year. I would commend it to your reading list. With that, we do have meeting minutes to approve from our last meeting of 2022, which was on December 21st. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The meeting minutes are approved. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. There are 4 items on today's consent agenda. Item number 1 concerns acquisition of indirect control of a Maryland Water and Sewage Company between Corix Infrastructure US Inc., Southwest Water Company, Maryland Water Service Inc., and SW Merger Acquisition Corp. Item number 2 is an application from Acrobat Energy LLC for a license to supply electricity. Item number 3 is an application from BreakerBox LLC for a license to supply natural gas. And item number 4 is a request from Finance Guru LLC to cancel its electricity and gas supplier licenses.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm going to turn to Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there representatives here this morning from BreakerBox LLC for item 3? We may have some questions for you. In fact, we're probably going to ask you to take the podium to my left or your right, if you would. Mr. Herbert, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Charles Herbert on behalf of staff. I wanted to quickly note that shortly before the admin, we were notified that Constellation parent company has some outstanding fees owed to the Commission due to ownership changes. We emailed the company shortly before the meeting, and they did acknowledge that they will pay the fees ASAP. So I just wanted to note that for the record.
Thank you. I note that the complaints section of the Bucksheet checklist is more extensive than it is for most of these brokerage applications for a license. Could you shed some light on that? Just give me a sense of what the complaint history is of this entity.
Yes, Commissioner, I can. So most of the complaints associated with this set of companies are against Constellation New Energy, which is the affiliate that's listed in the Bucksheet. And most of them occur in Texas and Massachusetts. While analyzing the Bucksheet, broke down complaints by category, and the vast majority of complaints, 54%, were related to concerns pertaining to rates and charges. Some of those were disputes related to the usage. Some of them were because of enrollment delay. Some of them were because the customer didn't understand how certain types of payment plans worked. And then some of them were due to, another chunk was due to hold times. And in all the cases, in nearly all the cases, the customer was satisfied by the explanation given by the company pertaining to the complaints. Very little, if any, of the more serious slamming misrepresentation. So overall, we didn't find enough evidence to suggest that either of these companies is a bad actor.
So I appreciate that. I see 188 complaints in the last 6 months in Texas, 92 in Massachusetts in the last 3 years, and there's a complaint in New Jersey. 11 complaints in New Jersey and 1 in Ohio. And I think, and I thank you for that, Mr. Herbert. I appreciate it. And appreciate you highlighting that in the Bucksheet. Let me turn to the company. This is a very high number of complaints, in my opinion, and it's something that I've been very attentive to, and the Commission has been very attentive to recently. First of all, would you mind start by explaining the affiliate relationship between BreakerBox, Constellation New Energy Services, and Constellation Energy?
So Constellation New Energy.
And ma'am, if you could enter an appearance before you
I'm
respond.
sorry. My name is Flossie Davis, and I represent Constellation Energy in Maryland. With me today is my colleague Neil Roper, and Neil Roper represents BreakerBox from a regulatory perspective, and then also is familiar with the Texas and Massachusetts complaints that were referenced by staff. So Constellation New Energy is the electricity supplier affiliate of of Constellation Energy, the parent. Breaker Box is the broker affiliate of that company, and Breaker Box is a completely separate company and is actually walled off for almost all purposes from the competitive supplier affiliates such as Constellation New Energy. So Breaker Box it's walled off for those reasons. It's walled off for really two separate reasons. One, because Breaker Box, as a broker, will have access to competitively sensitive information from Constellation's competitors, and that information cannot flow to Constellation New Energy. So it's walled off for that purpose. And then also, Breaker Box.
Why? Why is it walled off?
For antitrust reasons. So Constellation New Energy, as a competitive supplier of electricity products, cannot have access to competitively sensitive information of its competitors that isn't available to the public. So if Breaker Box is getting that information, it's not permitted, and we have restrictions in place to prevent it from flowing to Constellation New Energy. And then also, just from a practical perspective, customers coming to Breaker Box as a broker need to have assurance that Breaker Box is independent and is not giving special treatment to Constellation, flowing more business to Constellation simply because it's an affiliate. So for that reason as well, Breaker Box is treated as a separate entity. It has a separate employees. Really, one of the few things that it does share is some regulatory counsel, but it has its separate compliance plan, and as was described in the responses to staff, it has separate folks to deal with complaints and so forth.
So compliance is important, obviously. But it looks like there were some compliance problems considering the number of complaints that have been received from Breaker Box. So explain to me the robustness of Breaker Box's compliance, since it's walled off from its corporate affiliates and its parent company, and why I should have trust in the fact that they take compliance seriously there.
Well, so one of the things to keep in mind is the complaints that we are talking about are complaints to Constellation New Energy. Breaker Box, has Breaker Box had any complaints? Breaker Box has not had any complaints against it as a broker.
Okay, so then talk to me about Constellation New Energy's compliance. Same question.
So Constellation New Energy has, we have a whole group in the company focused on compliance. We take compliance very seriously. And Neil can provide some insight into the specifics of the complaints in Texas, and then also the complaints in Massachusetts, and we can also talk about complaints in other regions. So there certainly are times when an inadvertent compliance failure may result in complaints, but I would say the vast majority of complaints that we see are unrelated to compliance deficiencies. They are caused by, for example, in Texas, again, as Neil can explain, we're the direct biller for customers. So when there's a price spike and customers start really looking at their usage, they will call to complain and say, I don't think I use this much electricity. We don't consider that to be a compliance failure because it's not even us, even if it were a metering issue, it's not even us metering the customer. And typically it's not that. Typically it is the customer sees the price spike, that's the nature of the market and reacts.
So I read between the lines, and I suspect you're right. In my opinion, I probably agree with you. I think it is more in the realm of a failure to communicate variable price contracts with the consumer. And when they get sticker shock, they complain. And I think you more than likely have a communications issue with your customers than a compliance issue with the regulators. Now, these complaints are to the regulators of these states. So it is a compliance issue. They have the same rules we do. We say when we receive a complaint, go back and try to resolve it with your utility first or your supplier first or whatever. But the fact is that 188 complaints in a 6-month period is extraordinary. We'd be hauling you in here if it was in Maryland, saying,
Absolutely.
"What's up?" And so I would like to hear not a minimization of this, but an ownership of this. That's what I'd like to hear.
We're not minimizing it at all, and in fact, we in response to the uptick in complaints, and it wasn't even just an uptick in complaints. I mean, it was an uptick in calls to our consumer calls to our customer care, asking questions, people calling to make sure that they were just getting their new plan, they were getting enrolled in their new plan because they were concerned about being put on variable rates. Just even, there was just an uptick in communication, an uptick in calls, call volume, sheer call volume, an increase. You'll see some of the complaints were with respect to hold time, because all of that creates just an increase in the amount of frustration that people are going through because they're on hold. And so our customer care team, our compliance team, really was focused on this. And as I said, this was for a period of a few months during the summer, and there was quite a focus on this to get this in hand, to decrease the wait times, to figure out ways to decrease customer frustration,
I got a couple more.
and to address the customer concerns. So it's not something that is taken lightly by any stretch. I mean, within the company, there's been an extreme focus on this, and certainly the reduction in complaints that happened after that time was a testament to that. It certainly isn't a perfect system, but it's something that we take extremely seriously and have an intense focus on it in the company. And it's never taken lightly. A single customer complaint is not taken lightly, regardless of the nature of that complaint or whether it's related to something that was within our control or not.
Okay, but you do acknowledge that 188 complaints in a 6-month period is an outlier in this space.
It absolutely is.
Okay.
I mean, it's an outlier for us.
Okay, let me ask you this: we've had discussions in this hearing room about breaker box before. Can you give me some context of that? Refresh my memory when we may have discussed breaker box and Constellation New Energy Services. Maybe it was the creation of the affiliate. I'm not sure. I don't remember, but I just want to know what.
I do remember when the first breaker box application for broker services in the electricity space came up for review. At that time, there were questions about complaints for Constellation New Energy before the commission. So the Consumer Affairs Division had a number of complaints that had not been addressed in a timely manner, and we investigated that internally
I recall
and
now.
discovered that there had been it was really just a technical issue that was resulting in complaints going someplace that they weren't being monitored.
I recall now. Thank you.
Yeah.
I remember the mea culpa that was offered
Yeah,
by
we've
Constellation.
fully
so-
addressed that and now have multiple levels of protection in place to ensure that that doesn't happen again.
All right, just one more, if I may, and I appreciate the indulgence of the chairman of the commission. But, sir, could you introduce yourself and give any comments that you may want to offer us?
Sure. No, my name is Neil Roper. I'm Assistant General Counsel. I represent Breaker Box, and as Flossie mentioned, I also am familiar with some of the Texas and Massachusetts complaints. So the only thing I'll say in terms of the Massachusetts complaints is we actually are looking into what the commission has given to us, because our records indicate we only had 27 complaints in 3 years, and not, which in itself we're not happy with, but we do want to look at that discrepancy because there's
right.
a gap in those numbers.
Fair enough. I just, I'm not going to belabor the point, but I hope we don't see complaints coming before this commission with these affiliates and this entity in Maryland, and we expect our customers to be given due deference with respect to consumer protections in this state. And we take it very seriously, and this commission has a new focus on this. And we may not be, you may not have thought this was gentle, but we may not be as gentle in the future should we see you again on these, in this regard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Roper, are you disputing the number of complaints that we are reporting in staff's buck sheet today? You said 27?
I said, yes, we've looked and we've actually looked a few times. We only have 27 on record.
Total?
Total for 3 years.
In Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts. You know, if acceptable, I think the commission got those numbers directly from the Mass DPU. If that's the case, I would, I would ask that we can talk to whoever the commission spoke with, because I would, if there were more than we are aware of, then certainly that's concerning to us.
Well, you're free to do that. Have you not done that yet?
No, I was going to speak with who, because the staff report indicated they spoke with someone at the DPU. If that's the case, I just wanted to get that contact for that person.
But you've had staff's recommendation for at least several days now, is that right?
Yes, and I have not, because we've gone back and forth trying to confirm internally those numbers.
Let's make things simple with respect to Texas and the 188 complaints. You don't dispute that number, do you?
Do not know.
How many complaints did Breaker Box receive directly?
0.
I find that very, very hard to believe, Mr. Roper. Like Commissioner O'Donnell just stated, that before a customer can file a complaint with the commission, they first need to attempt to resolve it with, in this case, I believe it's the Texas Public Utility Commission. So I thought you were going to tell me 500 or 1,000 complaints were filed, and then the customers only brought a much lower number, 188, to the commission. So am I understanding this wrong? Because I can't believe that Breaker Box did not receive a single complaint.
Breaker Box, the broker, did not. Those complaints were Constellation New Energy.
CNE, okay. I'm sorry. How many complaints did CNE receive?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but certainly more than the 187 that you mentioned.
Ms. Davis mentioned that the company takes compliance seriously. We heard from Charlie a little while ago that you have outstanding payments due to this commission. Can you explain to how we find ourselves in that position today?
I mean, quite honestly, we were not aware of those costs. I've been talking to I've been talking to our compliance professional who makes those filings and trying to track that down. Where I honestly don't know what to say about that. I don't know. We just found out about this, right? That these were outstanding right before now. We haven't received any invoices or anything like that. Not that that's an excuse. We should be paying what's necessary up front, but I just have not had a chance to look into that, and we certainly will look into it and make sure that whatever documentation we're missing on our end about this requirement is taken care of, so that it's handled on a going forward basis without this misstep. But I honestly do not know.
Okay,
what
you don't know? I don't. How much do you owe us?
Do not know.
Mr. Herbert, how much do they owe the commission?
I'm not entirely sure either. I'd been given an estimate that it was a few $100s, but I can't say for certain at this time.
We have the Deputy Executive Secretary behind you, Miss Best. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Amanda Best. I just wanted to clarify that the total amount that's owed is about $1,000 altogether. It's for $250 fees back from February of 2022 when Exelon and Constellation were divesting, and Exelon split into the utilities and Constellation split into the generation space. There were 4 notices of ownership change that were filed, and so for each of those, there's $250 fees,
Okay.
and so those are what are outstanding, are the 4 fees for those. So $1,000 total.
$1,000 total. Ms. Davis, we'll get you duplicate copies of those invoices.
And and that should have been submitted with the filings without needing an invoice. So I apologize that that did not happen, and we will take care of it as soon as possible.
As Commissioner O'Donnell just stated, we take this very seriously. The commission does not hesitate to require parties to show cause as to why their licenses should not be revoked or penalties assessed. The history here does not give me a tremendous amount of confidence. I recognize that there was a rough patch during the summer of 2022. Hopefully the call centers have been properly staffed at this point. Yes?
Yes.
And if customers in Maryland needed assistance, would they be calling that call center?
No, we haven't been having the same issues in Maryland at all. I honestly don't have exactly how calls are routed right now, but we can certainly get you that information if it would be useful.
I think that would be useful. That would be okay. So that causes a few additional questions. Are you stating that the customer care would be here in Maryland, or do you not know?
I don't have that information offhand.
Mr. Roper, do you know?
I do not have that information.
When the call center apparently melted down over the summer, where was that call center?
So we have multiple call centers, and we can get you that information. I don't know for certain where each one is, so I'm not comfortable giving a definitive answer.
Are they in the United States?
To my knowledge, I believe they're in Texas, but if there are some outside, we can obviously get you that information
Okay.
as well.
With my colleagues' indulgence, I would like to hold this item over until we get some more answers, until we receive confirmation that the regulatory fees owed to this commission have been paid. Does any commissioner object to that? Commissioner Bubar.
Thank you. I don't object, but I do have a question. I noticed that in your filing that Craig Wilson, the LLC president and CEO of BreakerBox, has a history of working at Constellation for 16 years. Just wanted confirmation that he wasn't overseeing or involved in any of the issues with Constellation New Energy Services.
That's yeah, he's not. He's completely separated from Constellation at this point. He does not have access to any of the customer service representatives or any of the operational folks with Constellation.
Right, but when he was, did he have any engagement with the issues that we're talking about in terms of
Yeah,
complaints?
and my apologies for my confusion. So when you reference Constellation New Energy Services, that's not an entity. So I was racking my brain to see if I was forgetting about a company. So Constellation New Energy, those issues, no, he was not involved in overseeing any of those, any
Okay.
complaint issues or similar.
Thank you. And I do not object to your proposal, Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Richard.
Mr. Chairman, I have no objection, although I think it's a good idea. But I just want to understand the business just a little bit. So BreakerBox is a broker, is that correct? Okay, and you currently have customers, brokerage customers in Maryland on the electricity side of your company, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and do you deal with residential customers, or is this primarily just business customers?
No residential customers in Maryland.
Okay. Okay, and will that be the intent also
Correct.
with the gas application?
Yes, Commissioner. Correct.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We will hold this item over for a few weeks. I'm not sure what the date will be, but we'll work with the parties to schedule an appropriate date. In the meantime, Mr. Roper, you'll have the opportunity to work with Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities to figure out the discrepancies there, as well as to shed some light on call center operations for commercial and industrial customers in Maryland, should this commission vote to issue Breaker Box LLC a license. Also, I would ask that the Executive Secretary's office provide Ms. Davis directly with a copy of the past due invoice, and upon receipt, remit payment within 5 business days. Once payment is received, then we'll work on scheduling this item again for a future appearance.
Thank you, Chairman Stanek. And if I could I just get clarification with respect to the question regarding call centers? You referenced commercial and industrial. Are you talking about with respect to Breaker Box?
With respect to Breaker Box.
Okay, we did provide that information to staff in advance of this meeting, so we're happy to answer any questions with respect to that. If there are additional requests with respect to call centers for Constellation New Energy, then just a follow-up RFI or similar would be appreciated, just so we make sure we're answering exactly the questions that are needed.
Thank you, and I recognize that I was somewhat confused with this arrangement between the parent, CNE, and Breaker Box. Commissioner.
So that raises another question in my mind. Does Constellation New Energy have a license in Maryland?
Yes,
And they provide retail third-party supply services to residential customers?
yes.
Then I want to know about the call services of Constellation New Energy as well. So
Yes.
both Breaker Box and Constellation New Energy, because I want to get a view into what you're doing.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. If you will speak with Mr. Herbert, make sure we have all the correct contact information so we receive our payment timely and we don't delay this item being rescheduled.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Do commissioners have questions on the remainder of this consent agenda? Seeing none, I would move that with respect to item number 1, the Corix infrastructure item, that we approve the transaction. With respect to item number 2, Acrobat Energy LLC, that we grant the company a license to operate as an electricity supplier in Maryland, limited to broker services for the customer classes and service territories applied for and recommended by staff, and direct the company, Acrobat Energy, to file notice with the commission within 30 days of any changes to the information in its application. With respect to item number 4, Finance Guru LLC, I move that we approve the cancellation request. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar,
Aye.
Commissioner Linton,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Aye.
and Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motions are approved. A programming note for those of you who are waiting for case number 9669, the Dobbs Goose case. That case will begin in approximately 30 minutes in this hearing room with the Honorable Ryan McClain presiding. This meeting is now